Hello, everyone, and welcome to Musing, music for the adventurous listener here on CJSW 90.9 FM in Calgary. I'm your host, Janna Sailor. On today's show, I'm in conversation with composer and flautist Sean Clarke. Sean's introspective music focuses on emotion, memory, nature, and consciousness, and has been performed by the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, the National Youth Orchestra of Canada, the Griffin Trio, Quatuor Bozzini, Lands and Ensemble, and Ensemble MUSING. Performed across Canada and in the United States and France, his music has been featured on 2 CMC Centre Discs albums published by the Royal Conservatory of Music and broadcast by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And today, we are highlighting his recently released and very personal album, A Flower for My Daughter. Let's listen in. So welcome, Sean. It's really great to have you in conversation today on Musing. Really looking forward to our time together.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks very much.
So first of all, many congrats on the release of your debut album, A Flower for My Daughter. I have to say that I have so enjoyed experiencing your music and the beauty and sensitivity that it is infused with. The pieces are so personal and programmatic in nature. Can you tell us about this album and your concept for it?
Yeah, this album kind of took shape after the birth of my daughter, who's my first child. That was in 2020. And I started writing a piece for her, and all the pieces after that were kind of influenced by becoming a parent. And I started to try to write in a very delicate way to try to kind of represent the feelings I was having of kind of vulnerability and emotion and joy, but also anxiety. And so kind of a mix of all these issues together.
I'm sure many of us can relate in some way to those. When you think about your compositional output and your musical language, how do you describe it to others? How do you describe your musical voice?
I really love harmony in the classical music and popular music that I love. Usually the most expressive moments for me and the most beautiful come from harmony. So I really love to focus on harmony as like an expressive tool. So I usually start with harmony, and I try to, it's not tonal, but it does have kind of tonal centers. So there's usually an important pitch that can kind of go further away from or towards. And I try to be able to have more dissonant moments and more pure sounding moments. So there's kind of a range of colors. And I also kind of think of it from a painting perspective. I love the paintings of Monet where there's lots of rich colors and mixed together. And I try to do the same with harmony, kind of have like clouds of harmony that are shifting and becoming more intense or becoming more relaxed. and to be able to play with that quasi-tonality.
what would you say have been some of your influences on your compositional approach, whether that be a more tangible thing like composition school, and then also life experiences?
Well, from a musical point of view, I mean, a couple teachers, including, of course, Alan Bell in Calgary and Anna Sokolovich in Montreal, they both really work with harmony and colors to create these beautiful forms. So they've definitely been an influence. And also, they both think about drama and like the drama of a piece and the shape of it, kind of like a story without plot, but just the intensity of the music creates a story. So that's definitely an influence. Also, while I was studying, I studied the late pieces of Pierre Boulez, French composer, and they're much more, you have pitch centers much more than in the earlier works. And there's a lot of like sustain pedals down and the washes of color. And so that kind of inspired me as well. It kind of reminded me of Monet and all the paintings and stuff like that. And I guess the last thing would be just trying to explore harmonies. I just try to explore new harmonies. Each piece I think of little motives, and I try to build the piece almost exclusively out of those motives. So kind of take the harmony, expressive harmony out of those motives, see how much I can get from those little ideas.
And a lot of your music seems quite programmatic in nature. What are there other influences that we can hear in your music?
Yeah, I used to shy away from any programmatic text, but then I thought I might as well just try to express or lay bare what was already there. So usually I write a piece and I'll think, what does this really reflect? And often something about nature, like being in nature. I grew up in Alberta, so I was going around Banff and hiking and camping a lot. So there's the nature aspect of it, being in nature, that feeling, especially in the mountains, a very like intense, vast feeling and emotions with that, and like the smell of the trees and the sound of the wind through the trees. That's also very evocative. David Lynch actually is another influence. He's a filmmaker, and he also talks about the influence of the sound of the wind through the trees. I think that was in around Oregon, but the same sort of thing in British Columbia and Alberta, I find. It's like very evocative and inspiring. So it's the nature aspect of it.
Love that. And that really comes through in your tonal language. Now let's flip back to the album for a minute. The album is set up in a way in which each piece like flows into the next one. And these are these beautifully crafted miniatures. Tell me about the compositional process and how you went about writing these. And did you have this structure in mind from the beginning?
I composed each one separately, but then when I started to think about the album, I looked back at all the pieces that I'd written and which would be the most meaningful, and I tried to order them in a way that one would flow into the other. And I was also really focused on making small pieces. I think the longest one is like 10 minutes or something like that. I was really inspired by like small little pieces of Bach, like the inventions and especially the sinfonias, the three voice sinfonias. There's like a little world and it only takes like 3.5 minutes. So I was thinking of trying to create something very small, intricate that could be listened to again and again, but just over a short little period of time. And then some of the pieces that have multiple movements, usually they're just multiple short little pieces that create a little whole. And even the longer pieces, like the Nocturnes, are kind of episodic. Like they have one little section and then a second section and a third. And then those sections come back transformed or developed a little bit or intensified. So I always think in small little chunks and try to create as much expressivity in those little pieces, little worlds as I can.
And tell me about the role that the piano plays. It seems to me like the piano weaves it together as kind of the connecting link. Is that correct?
Yeah, it really focuses on solo piano music. And I find that to be like one of the most intimate kind of musical forces, but still having a really rich, sustained harmonic possibilities. And through all of the piano pieces, I've kept the sustaining pedal down. So each note of a melody kind of continues to ring. So there's not really any non-chord tones or there's no short little notes. Usually even a short note will continue to ring because of the sustain pedal. So it kind of blurs all of the melodies into harmony. And if there are many new notes, then it creates kind of a more complex cloud of harmony where things are changing more rapidly and everything's ringing and kind of clashing against each other. And then if I slow down the amount of new notes being, and it's maybe just the same three notes several times, very slowly, then it kind of simplifies it because we just have the same kind of three bells ringing through and there's no new pitches and kind of simplifies the harmony. So I use the sustain pedal a lot.
So tell me about the collaborative process with the musicians that are performing these. You have a beautiful all-star cast. You have Roger Feria Jr., Talia Fuchs, yourself on flute, and then Nathan Bredeson on guitar. And how did you go about selecting musicians for this project? Did you have them in mind when you were composing, or what's it like also writing for yourself?
Yeah, that's a big challenge. Each partnership was like a really real partnership in each case. With Roger Feria Jr., he's been my friend for many, many years. He was at the University of Calgary as well. He actually is a composer as well and studied under Alan Bell, David Eagle, Hopley, everyone in Calgary. And so I knew I wanted to work with him because he's just so musical and sensitive in the interpretations that he brings. And he also understands things from the composer's point of view. He understands the structure because he composes himself, and he's a very sensitive musician. So we have a very easy sort of communicating relationship where we can just bluntly or not as bluntly say what we're thinking to be able to really work together and rehearse and try out different things. Lots of times he would play something in a different way and it would be bring out things I didn't think about in the music or an interpretation. And that's what I love, to be able to just give the performer something to work with. I like to think of composing kind of like a screenwriter. You're just giving the actor as much as possible to work with, and they should be able to do it 6 different ways on 6 different takes, and each one will be valid or interesting. And then with Talia Fuchs, I worked with her in the opera program in Halifax. Vocopolis Productions puts on this production of creating small mini operas from scratch, the production is called. And so we were paired together. And we didn't know each other before that, but we started Zoom conversations before the piece was written and then during the composition process. And then I would send her sketches and she would tell me what would work and what wouldn't work as well for voice in general and her voice specifically. And then we gradually got to the finished piece and then were able to workshop it for about a week in Halifax before the premiere. And then a year after that, we came back to it to record and could bring even more thoughts to it and think about how we want to do this recorded versus live. kind of like we're doing it for a movie instead of theater. So maybe something smaller, something's larger. So she had like a really integral part in it. And she's a composer as well. So she brings the performer, the composer, interpretation, and also text setting and all these elements to the table. And working with Nathan Bredeson, that's the oldest piece on the album. That was written right before my daughter was born. That was also a collaborative process right from before composing started, talking to him about how, learning from him, how the guitar worked, what works best, what kind of shapes, hand shapes work best, what's easy on the guitar and what's not, because I'd never written for a guitar before. So he really helped me see what was possible on the guitar. And then my goal was to write a piece that was kind of like a piano with a sustained pedal down. He creates a shape with his hand and then he plays lots of the notes without having to move his hand, so all the strings ring through. So he also had an important role throughout the entire composition process. And then he played the premiere, and then we came back several years later, reworked it, and then he gave this beautiful interpretation of it. So that was also a really great partnership.
Brilliant. And even as a violinist, when I watch classical guitarists, I can't even fathom the complexity and what's required of their fingers. Can you talk us through some of this musical journey that we go on and some of the programmatic elements that the listener will experience through your music as they journey through the album?
Yeah, there's one element is parenthood, or more generally caring for someone, whether it's a child or a niece or a nephew or an elderly parent or an animal, really the act of caring for someone. And that felt very vulnerable and also sensitive. So I tried to write, especially the title piece, the first piece on the album, something very delicate and light that is mostly I've tried to make it more consonant and kind of warm, but also with some elements of kind of anxiety that come in from time to time. And there's also the piece for voice and piano. It kind of deals with similar things. There's a protagonist, Clara. She's 71. She lives in Nova Scotia, and she's thinking back to her son, who she lost in the Second World War, but she's also looking ahead to the next day when her daughter and her granddaughter are going to come. And I was writing that as I had a very young daughter myself, and thinking about the relationship between parents and grandparents as well, and caring for little ones and kind of the effects of memory. So that's kind of a more tangible, concrete version of working with the same material. And there's also elements of nature, like in the flute piece, there's a mountain hymnal. I thought of it as if a flutist is playing in a mountain or a mountain valley, and you hear the pitches echoing off the mountains and creating kind of like a cloud of harmony again. And there's also elements of nature. There's a piece with a Tennyson poem as the inspiration, and the Tennyson poem is about the stillness of Christmas Eve and bells ringing across 4 townships, and they can hear each other, and you can hear some of them clearer and other ones echo through the stillness of the night. And that has always been an evocative poem. And then I thought it's kind of the same feeling you get late at night at Christmas Eve when the house is full of family, but everyone is sleeping and everything is completely still. So I tried to create like a musical bells for that piece.
Given kind of the personal nature and perspective of these, what was it like to, first of all, entrust these musicians with your work to interpret it, and then also put that out there into the world?
It's a little bit vulnerable feeling. I wrote them all at home just for myself, either for myself to play or for my friend Roger to play at some point. So it was all very kind of like private, but then I thought I should try to put the music out there so that my children can listen to it later, so they can have sort of an idea of what I was doing or what I was like at this time. And so, yeah, it's very vulnerable. But then I thought that's probably the work of a composer or a performer, is to be vulnerable and is to talk about these things, because it's not often talked about in other parts of society, or it is not a natural fit with other types of jobs. So I thought I should probably not hide it, probably put it out there so that give people a chance to connect it with their own lives and not to kind of obfuscate the real ideas behind it or inspirations behind it. So it feels very sensitive, but it seems like a good space for it. And while I workshopped the opera, actually, the mini opera, that helped a lot because I had wrote the text and I wrote the music, and then it was a very public thing, and you had to workshop with many people, with other composers and other singers, and Talia, of course. And that process was helpful because it helped me take something very personal and create a public version for it.
I can't sleep. My mind won't. I keep thinking of you, John. You'd be 50 tomorrow, my boy. I miss you, John. I miss you, my boy, my little. They'll hike the trail tomorrow. Little Anne on Jill's back, snacks in hand, sun hat on, a gentle mirror of you and me, 32 years on, and reach the top, see the ocean. My sun set on that water, yet for Anne it's only rising. Her hands are like yours. I don't know what it means. I know what it means. But when they're back, sun-dappled and tired, we'll eat and play and think of you. And for Anne, make a golden moment, a warm place to think on back to. When she grows old, a trail for her to walk on, warm and bright, warm and bright, behind you and
What do you hope that listeners will take away from experiencing this music? And are there plans in the works for live performances of it that they can come and experience?
I hope that they can connect it to the music through their own life. I mean, if the themes resonate with them, that's good. But if not, I kind of feel like the sound is the most important thing. So I always feel when I'm writing program notes, I almost want to write it at the end. But if none of this resonates with you, just take it however it resonates with you. That is the correct way, because there's details baked into the music. But really, the only thing that's available to the listener is the musical details. So I just hope it resonates with them in their own life, in their own personal way, whether it aligns with what I've described in the notes or not. And I'm hoping to do these pieces live in the future, writing other pieces as well at the same time. But I've kind of focused on the recording aspect of it, which is very interesting to me because you can really craft something and then share it easily, and it's less ephemeral because we can listen to it again and again. And it doesn't have the special fleeting quality of a live performance, but it can be more like an artifact, kind of like you filmed a scene. And then that scene can always be played live in front of an audience, but at least you have a filmed version, one version of it.
I have to say some of my most profound musical experiences have been, listening to recordings in my car. I mean, live performances are incredible. That takes on a whole other kind of energy to it when you're experiencing it with other people. But when it's just you and the music, it becomes very personal. And as a musician, I personally love the experience of being able to lay things down in the studio. And, that is a performance in itself and the whole process of the people involved. And I can see how that could be a really rewarding thing to be able to craft this, especially with everything flowing perfectly one to the next. You have that kind of control in a studio environment and on an album. So what's next for you compositionally? Where are you going? Where are you headed?
Well, the one thing is I better write a piece for my son, who's only 1.5, because I did this whole album, and then right at the end, he arrived. I thought, he's going to look back and not be happy with this. So I've written a piece that's just been recorded, I think this week, by Jay Marsh. She's a flutist in the Toronto area, and she has a great project where it's music inspired by different parts of Canada, and the first volume was Eastern Canada. And then now we're working together for the Western Canada part. And so she's playing the same piece that is on my album, Mountain Hymnal, for flute and resonance. So I'm really excited to see her interpretation and not my own, because that's how I've built it, to have performers put their own musical ideas into it. So I'm really excited about that. And then I've also written a piece for my son that is inspired by the foothills of Alberta, because maybe 1 or 2 trips ago out west to Calgary, I drove into BC on the Crow's Nest Pass through the foothills, which I hadn't done in so long. And it's just such a beautiful journey going, especially from BC into Alberta, from the full Rocky Mountains into the foothills and then into the prairies, and how the sky changes and the landscape changes and the sun hits it. So it's 2 movements, and I've called it 2 sunrises on Alberta foothills. And so they're 2 little movements that use similar ideas, and they even have a similar structure, but they're distinct. So they have a little set of 2 that have kind of, I think of it as 2 sunrises over maybe the same landscape, but each day, based on the weather, based on the cloud, is different. So that's for 2 flutes and percussion, and Jay Marsh is playing it with her colleague. So I'm excited to hear that as well.
Oh, that sounds beautiful. And is there a full album of songs for my son?
Yeah, I think there will have to be, because I don't know if one piece will balance a whole album. So I think I'll have to keep that in mind as I go forward.
Yeah, back to the drawing board, Dad.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Sean Clarke, so wonderful to be in conversation with you today. Thank you so much for bringing your creativity and your beautiful music to our platform. Much appreciation.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you.
This has been Musing on CJSW 90.9 FM in Calgary. I'm your host, Janna Sailor. Thank you so much for joining me for this celebration of music, creators, and ideas. Musing is a production of the Canadian Music Centre Prairie Region and is heard right here in Calgary and on all major podcast platforms. As we end our time together, we recognize that there are more than 630 First Nations communities across the lands that we now know of as Canada, representing 50 distinct nations and Indigenous languages. In addition, there are Métis in every province of the country and 53 Inuit communities speaking different dialects of Inuktitut across the north. We acknowledge them as the original music makers, dancers, creators, and caretakers of our lands, and they continue to inspire and teach us as we commit to learning and moving forward together. Until next time, thanks for listening and for supporting Canadian musicians and artists in your community. I will leave you with more music of Sean Clarke. Until next time, take care.